a pod about the Democratic Party. And look, I think over the last couple of days we fixed everything.
This podcast is called "Nothing Is Wrong with the Democratic Party." It is perfect.
Perfect.
Anyone who says otherwise is a traitor.
No, I mean, just to explain a little more, like, the reason that I wanted to do this is we have been all over the country in the last year, live shows, marches, get out the vote events, and we've met all these activists and organizers and first-time voters and first-time candidates who are energized and excited, and they're mostly young and women and people of color, and it's so inspiring. And we also get, and you've gotten this too, we also get the same questions everywhere we go, which is, what should our message be? What issue should we focus on? Like, how do we avoid a repeat of 2016? And, you know, we don't talk about that enough on this podcast. And the four of us don't have all the answers to those questions. So I thought, why not do a 15-episode limited series on the Democratic Party? It's about learning from our past mistakes and building for the future. And I talked to people about the Obama years. I talked to Hillary staffers like our friend Jen Palmieri, and Bernie staffers like Becky Bond and Faz Shakir about 2016. I talked to Adam Serwer and Simone Sanders and Marsha Chatelain about race in America. I talked to Rebecca Traister and others about the challenges that women candidates face. I talked to leftists and liberal policy people about the economy and immigration activists and foreign policy experts. And I talked to everyone from the DNC chair, Tom Perez and Keith Ellison, to state party chairs, to first-time candidates like Danica Rome and Jennifer Carroll Foy about organizing and winning. And, I did a few focus groups, which was really fun. And then I figured, you know what? As a way to hear from even more people, I figured I'd ask everyone to call in and give their thoughts about the party. And I phrased the question, what's wrong and how do we fix it? Because we don't tend to learn a lot from only congratulating ourselves about what's going right. And I also think that we're confident enough as a party to engage in a little self-reflection. And here's the good news, Dan. Like 90% of the hundreds and hundreds of voicemails that we're getting are positive and constructive and hopeful about the future of the party. There's only a few profanities here and there. And it's really inspiring. It's really inspiring. And getting all these voicemails has been wonderful. And it makes me want to work even harder to kick the shit out of Republicans in November. So, again, call in. And if you want to call in and say nothing's wrong with the party at all, we'd love to hear that too. That's totally okay. But we want to hear from everyone and basically help us tell a story about a party that is finding its way out of the wilderness. That's what this podcast is about. So,
yes. Can I say a couple things about this?
Please do.
Yes. One, can we just stipulate that Jon Favreau and everyone involved in this podcast believes the Democrats are a much better party than the Republicans. They have better ideals, better candidates, better people, better integrity, all of the above.
Yeah.
And so it's not like some of the criticism has been that somehow you're ceding the argument that Republicans are better. That's not it. I think, and I've
clearly we've been doing this fucking podcast for a year and a half now.
Yeah. And I get, like, I understand for people who may not have as much context as all the people you've talked to, all the things you've worked on, people who just respond to the initial tweet,
right? That
Democrats are tired of getting kicked around. The party itself, if you're someone who has worked really hard for the Democratic Party for a long time, you've been under assault for a while. And not just from Republicans, but also from within our party, because there are, a lot of some of the rhetoric on the Bernie election was about the state of the Democratic Party. And so there are raw nerves and people are upset about it. But I think it's important to remember that this is largely about hosting a conversation about what is working in the party and what hasn't worked in the past and how we fix it in the future. Because we are right on the issues. There are more Democratic-leaning voters than there are Republican voters, yet Republicans control all levers of the government.
Right.
And that is something that should be examined and thought about. And so, if people I think people should listen to it, right, and see how they feel. And if it still bothers them afterwards, that's one thing. I don't think it will. but I think it's a very constructive, good thing. And I'm really glad you're doing it. And I'm glad you're the one who tweeted about it, not
me. Yeah, I mean, look, of course I know there are raw nerves on all sides of this debate. I guess my thought is you can either let that be and then say, because there's raw nerves, no one's going to talk about it, and we're all just going to be in our own little silos and be upset about it and ignore the other people's opinions. Or you can say, all right, we're going to dive in and have a conversation about it. And the reason that I wanted to do it is because I was like, I hope we can have a conversation that is constructive and interesting, and where people aren't like yelling all the time, but they're saying like, no, I believe that's wrong for this reason. And I realize that's way too much to hope on Twitter. But I'm thinking that through this and look, this podcast is not going to fix it. It's not going to fix all of our problems. And it's going to have a lot of shortcomings and failings on this podcast. I tried to talk to almost 100 people, but that's not going to be enough. There's other points of view that it's not going to capture. And so part of what I want to do when this actually comes out is have one episode come out, at the beginning of the week, and then sort of like field questions from people at the end of the week, so we constantly have more voices talking about this. And look, there's the segment of the criticism is from people who are like, and a lot of our friends in DC who are working really hard at the DNC and the DLCC and all these committees. I think they're thinking like, God, we're working really hard to get Democrats elected, and we don't need to be doing a bunch of navel gazing right now. Absolutely, we don't need to be doing a bunch of navel gazing. But I think as we're working to get these Democrats elected, as we're out there with the organizers and the activists and the people who are fighting every day, they need to know, and they're asking for, what is the message? What should we focus on? And if people in individual races and individual states and local communities can start sharing what they're doing right with other people in other places across the country, and we can get voters this information and listeners to this podcast information, then that's going to be helpful. I really believe that. So
yeah, just listen to it, check it out.
Okay. Quick update on the sorry, let me try that again. Okay. Quick update on the Trump crime syndicate. The president of the United States is now being compared to a mob boss by his own lawyers. Here's Jay Goldberg, new character in the story. Jay Goldberg, who represented Donald Trump back in the 90s and 2000s through his divorce proceedings, who now Trump has gone back to it for advice apparently recently. And here's Jay Goldberg talking to the Wall Street Journal about how he warned Trump that Michael Cohen might flip on him. Quote, "The mob was broken by Sammy the Bull Gravano caving in out of the prospect of a jail sentence." And here's the mooch on MSNBC Wednesday. Quote, "If you said to me and I had to flip a coin," which is not how this works. If you said to me and I had to flip a coin, is Cohen going to turn on President Trump? I would say no. Dan, what about these statements seems amiss to you?
Well, it seems like the Trump's closest supporters and friends and 10-day tenured communications directors all believe and just assume that Trump has committed many, many crimes. And the question isn't, were those crimes committed? The question is, will anyone tell the feds about those crimes, and then will Trump face any legal jeopardy? As opposed to another approach, which is just, let's take a back of the envelope idea here, would be I would encourage Michael Cohen to be fully forthcoming, because I know Donald Trump did nothing wrong. And the sooner we can wrap up this investigation, the better, the easier it will be for Donald Trump to focus all of his attention on making America great again. But that's not the approach they've taken. They've taken a slightly different one.
You and I have worked in communications for a long time. I don't think you need to be a communications expert, a communications professional, to say that maybe the best answer is no. I mean, he has nothing to flip him on. President did nothing wrong. He has nothing to worry about. Doesn't seem like a tough answer.
Well, it says a lot about, not just about Trump's crimes, but about sort of the media coverage, political narrative around Trump.
Right, that's
because
true.
It is the press also. I mean, this is like this. Our point has also been pointed out by members of the press, so this is not a monolithic thing. But the question really isn't, what did Trump do wrong, or if Trump did did things wrong, committed crimes. That's not the question the press is asking. The question is, under what circumstances will Trump face either political or legal repercussions for the things we already know he did?
Right.
And that is just a very different way in which we've ever talked about a president before. It's because everything that involves around, whether it's, potential collusion in the Mueller investigation or an array of particularly sketchy behavior and criminality in the Michael Cohen investigation is, Trump's poll numbers haven't moved once all year, so his voters clearly don't care. Or they're not going to be able to prove anything because Cohen's not going to flip, therefore we shouldn't care. Like, we should actually care about a president committing crimes either in office, in search of that office, or before they decided to run for that office, whether they go to jail or not, whether they lose, whether their poll numbers drop or not. Like, that is an actual thing that should be the biggest scandal in America, and we're sort of scoring it like it's a midseason baseball game. Yeah,
if the president of the United States is guilty of crimes, it is the biggest scandal in American history. Certainly for the presidency, certainly in politics. And it is worrisome because, like, the media, by the nature of the media, always goes to what's new, what's going to happen, what's next. And look, the word normalize has been overused, ever since the end of 2016. But it is almost like everyone has internalized that, he's probably a criminal, including his own people as they go on TV and talk about him. Everyone has internalized this. And so should crimes be revealed? Should the president be charged with anything? Should impeachment charges ever be brought? Should the crimes simply just be reported on? You're right that the next phase of the story is going to be what happens. And if Democrats don't have a majority, then maybe Republicans won't impeach him. Or can a sitting president be tried in office? And there'll be all these questions. And we're going to sort of blow past the idea that no, he and his associates were just charged with whatever they might be charged with. And it's very worrisome, to say the least.
Yes, it is worrisome.
So one action that someone is taking to head this off, the Attorney General for the state of New York, Eric Schneiderman, wants to change the state's law so that he can bring criminal charges against aides to Donald Trump who get pardons from Donald Trump. He basically wants to change the state's double jeopardy law that currently protects people from being tried for the same crime twice. He wants to add an exemption for presidential pardons since, particularly since the Scooter Libby pardon, it seems quite clear that Trump may once again abuse the presidential pardon power to pardon Michael Cohen or Paul Manafort or any of these unsavory characters who are under investigation and indictment. Do we think this law will pass? And if so, do you think it will influence Michael Cohen on what he decides to do next?
I think I might have what is a contrarian take on this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not an attorney. I have not been to law school. But I have seen on several occasions the movie Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd.
Okay,
where she's wrongly convicted of a murder.
Well, then you're good.
And then goes out to so she's framed for murder and then goes out, I believe, to murder someone knowing she can't go to jail for it.
Mm.
But I am skeptical. Double Jeopardy exists for a reason.
Yeah.
And I'm not positive that empowering the state to. Just because we have one president who may be selling pardons for his freedom does not mean that we should change the rule, because you could be in a world where Barack Obama commuted sentences or pardoned people for drug offenses that were well beyond what should have happened because of mandatory minimums or sentencing guidelines or whatever else. And then you have a Republican governor of a state then prosecuting those people again out of spite. And so I'm not sure this is in the world, the best. I don't think the best thing for the world to do to increase the power of the state to put people in jail more easily. But of course, if Trump just pardons everyone and gets off with them, I'd be particularly frustrated by that. So, per usual, Trump is sort of upending what progressives think we should do, because we have never confronted someone as corrupt and unwilling to adhere to the basic norms of American governing as Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I would encourage all of our legal friends of the pod to please let us know what they think about that, because I don't know. You make a very good point about, future presidencies and pardons and what, AGs and state legislatures and particularly red states might do when a progressive president pardons a bunch of people and commute sentences. That's worrisome as well.
Now, a law passed by a second branch of government that felt a need to check the power of an unbridled executive could pass a law that would say that you cannot use the pardon power in an investigation into yourself, or something like that. Now, that may not pass constitutional muster, but that is something. But you could test that as opposed to passing a broader law that sort of erodes the idea of double jeopardy in the American legal system.
Well, Dan, that's a great segue to our next topic, Mitch McConnell. So as Trump's associates, openly muse about his lawyer flipping on him, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said this week that he will not allow a vote on bipartisan legislation that would protect special counsel Robert Mueller. McConnell says it's not necessary because there haven't been any indications that Trump might fire Mueller, except, I guess, for all of the president's public statements. Dan, the bill's got Republican support. Why won't McConnell let it come to the floor for a vote?
Well, in a weird display of heroism, Chuck Grassley said he was going to continue to move it through the Judiciary Committee and basically throw the hot potato to Mitch McConnell. Now, we'll see if he actually follows through with that. McConnell has a pretty good way of getting Republican senators to bend the knee and do what he wants. So we'll see if it actually happens. But I found that to be an actually encouraging sign that you have some number of Republicans who are breaking with recent pattern and trying to do the right thing for the country. So kudos. I think this is all about 2018 Republican turnout, which is if the Republican Senate, if Mitch McConnell were to allow the Senate to pass a bill that is obviously going nowhere because Paul Ryan's certainly not doing anything, but if he were to allow the Republican Senate to pass a bill that was seen as pro-law enforcement and anti-Trump, which are actually two sides, they are actually opposite sides here, then you can see a world where the Trump voters in states like Indiana, North Dakota, Missouri, West Virginia that the Republicans need to potentially flip to maintain control of the Senate stay home. And so I think he is doing, Mitch McConnell's entire life view is party before country. He cares only about the accumulation of power for himself and the Republican Party. And so what is best for the Republican Party here in the short term, is to help aid and abet the criminality of Donald Trump. It is, in the long term, you would probably say maybe doing the right thing would work out for you. But Mitch McConnell does not believe that doing the right thing is reason enough to do something.
I think there's a good analogy, what Paul Ryan is to passing tax cuts and gutting Medicare at all costs. Mitch McConnell is to confirming right-wing judges. And that seems like he wants to control the Senate to continue confirming Trump's unqualified extremist judges and hopefully also put another one or two Supreme Court justices on the bench by the end of Trump's term. And he has decided that no amount of corruption, no amount of crimes from Donald Trump will stop him from doing that. And so he will do whatever it takes to cling to power and to hang on to a Republican majority in the Senate. And, he's pretty open about that. This is where we go back to our Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell. Paul Ryan likes to pretend he's a good guy and he cares about poverty or whatever he cares about. Mitch McConnell's just he's out there saying, putting Gorsuch on the bench and, blocking, stealing a Supreme Court seat. That's one of the proudest moments of my life. He just doesn't really give a shit.
He's bad. He's just really bad.
Really bad. I just sometimes look, I feel bad because we attack Paul Ryan so much and we attack Donald Trump so much. We don't spend enough time on how purely evil Mitch McConnell is. He's not a great guy. Now, some good news on the Republican side of the Senate is what you said about Chuck Grassley, Tom Tillis is a pretty conservative senator from North Carolina. He's one of the sponsors of this legislation. He's out there telling all of his conservative critics who are, Mark Meadows, one of the congressmen that runs the Freedom Caucus in the House, is one of them. He's from North Carolina as well. They're all complaining about Tom Tillis sponsoring this legislation. And Tillis is like, spare me. That was his quote. Spare me. Enough. He's like, I'm doing this. He's like, I know it's the right thing and it's not going to be popular, but I'm going to do it anyway. And he also said, like, yeah, Mitch McConnell controls the floor and controls which pieces of legislation come up for a vote in the Senate. But if there's enough of us Republican senators who vote for this bill, who say we want this bill, we think we can change his mind. We'll see. It didn't work so well on the fucking DREAM Act. But, good for him. Good for Chuck Grassley. Vote them all out still. But, they're right on this issue. But I think the bigger challenge for us is, Democrats, the only way these things are going to change is if Democrats take back the Senate. And we had some good news about this goal yesterday. There's a Quinnipiac poll out on Wednesday that has Beto O'Rourke down just 4 points to Ted Cruz, 47-43. The same poll found that 52% of Texans disapprove of Donald Trump's job performance in Texas. And I thought maybe one of the best statistics in the poll, Beto only has room to grow. 53% of the people polled have no opinion of Beto O'Rourke. They do not know him, and yet he is only down by 4 points. Dan, what did you think of this poll, and how much do we need Texas in the journey to take back the Senate?
Well, we certainly need, if you think that, and none of this is a guarantee, that we need to flip 2 seats, and if you think that Arizona and Nevada are 2 of the most likely, just given the who's running, the partisan spread of the state, et cetera, but we're also defending all of these seats in places like North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri, West Virginia, places that Trump won, in some cases by almost as many as 18 points.
Yeah.
And so we probably need a couple more other than the 2 flips, right? And so Tennessee is a very real option where former Governor Phil Bredesen is running, and Texas is another one. And there's something like Texas is a very hard state for a Democrat. There is no doubt about that. It is headed in the right direction, but this is a midterm, and it's a Texas. But if there was ever a candidate who could sort of run ahead of the demographic change in Texas and flip it now, it would be Beto, because he's running the right kind of campaign against the right opponent in Ted Cruz to have a real shot to do this. But he will only have that shot if people try to help him to do it, whether it's give $5 if you have it, make calls for him. If you live in Texas, volunteer for his campaign. He is building a grassroots movement down there, and that's what it's going to take to win. So it's good to see this poll prove what we saw on the ground anecdotally when we were there a couple months ago and got to spend a little time with Beto. And we did 4 shows in Texas. Obviously, we had Beto with us in Austin, but in the other 3 shows we mentioned his name, the crowd went insane. And that, with the exception of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, I have not heard a crowd react to a politician like that since we started doing these live shows a year and a half ago.
No, and just like just like we saw on the ground in Virginia, it's not just the top of the ticket in Texas in 2018 that is receiving all the energy and enthusiasm, even though I think Beto could be one of the best Senate candidates we've seen in years, as long as I can remember. But you see all these down ballot races, whether it's House races or even state House races. Like, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of first time candidates in Texas. There's people running in districts and in places in Texas where Democrats haven't run in years. Beto is going to counties where Democrats haven't been to in years. We had Julie Johnson on. She's when we were in Dallas. She's running for state house there. Because we care about down ballot races here at Crooked Media. And look, it's just the enthusiasm is infectious there. So something is happening in the state of Texas. And, will it be enough to carry all these Democrats over the finish line? It remains to be seen. But certainly that state is very interesting. It has a much higher disapproval rating for Donald Trump than other red states. And so something is going on there, but it's all going to come down to registering new voters because, in Texas, a lot of people don't vote. And a lot of people, and the people who don't vote are disproportionately young and Latino and people of color, and they tend to vote Democrat. And so I think it's going to be a massive organizing challenge in Texas. But yeah, look, we need 2 seats to flip, but that also means we need to hold all those other seats. And we don't talk about that enough on this show, but that's still going to be an uphill climb for people like Claire McCaskill and Heidi Heitkamp and Joe Manchin and Joe Donnelly and Bill Nelson now with Rick Scott. So it's the Senate's going to be tough, but in a big wave year, we can do it.
And let's not forget Ted Cruz is terrible.
Yeah, we'd be defeating one of the worst people in politics.
Someone who today, this is just the most amazing Ted Cruz thing ever. Donald Trump called Ted Cruz's wife ugly. He accused Ted Cruz's dad of killing JFK. He attacked Ted Cruz 9 ways from Sunday. Ted Cruz stood before the Republican convention and told the world he refused to endorse Donald Trump and told the world to vote their conscience.
He called Donald Trump a sniveling coward, pathological liar, no moral courage.
Which is actually a pitch-perfect description of St. Cruz. But so today, Time Magazine does their 100 most influential people. And they go around and ask people to write a little essay about one of the 100 people selected. So, for example, the Parkland kids were on the 100 most influential list. They asked Barack Obama to write about them. They wrote a very nice essay about their role in grassroots organizing and movement building. So Donald Trump, as President of the United States, is de facto on that list. And who do they get to write it? Who will write a love letter to Donald Trump in the pages of America's most prominent yet still dying news magazine? Ted Cruz wrote a love letter to Donald Trump today. A man who called his wife ugly and accused his dad of killing John F. Kennedy.
It tells you something about where Ted Cruz and his strategists are going for this race, though, that they believe. And look, one thing in the Q poll is I think Beto is winning among independents in Texas by, I want to say 51-36. I could be a little wrong. And Ted Cruz is just thinking it's all turnout. We are going to play to the right wing. We're going to play to the furthest right elements of our base. And so even though Donald Trump has a 52% disapproval rating, I'm going to write a glowing essay about him in Time Magazine because I want all the most hardcore Trump people to turn out for me. That's how I think I'm going to win the state. So that's Ted Cruz's strategy. We'll see if it prevails.
Terrible strategy.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Trying to make peace with the Trump supporters is one thing, but doing it in the most embarrassing way possible is not good politics. I don't care what state it is, what party you're in, what year it is. Writing a letter that says, I am weak and sad is not good politics.
Shamelessness is all the rage, Dan. That's why Donald Trump's president.
That is true.
All right, let's talk about the fact that Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Let's talk about the fact that the CIA director / Secretary of State nominee, Mike Pompeo, had a secret meeting with Kim Jong-un. There's something that doesn't happen every day. He's the highest-ranking American official to make direct contact with North Korea since Madeleine Albright, who Tommy had in an episode of Pod Save the World. Check it out. Met with Kim Jong-il in 2000. And this is in advance of Trump's potential meeting with the North Korean leader. Dan, what did you think about this? I mean, honestly, it seems in the realm of all the awful shit going on, pretty positive. I think it's better to have done some prep work before the Trump meeting than not do any prep work at all before a high-level meeting like that. Like in the realm of if we were having normal politics and normal diplomacy, you would think this is good. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's good. Everything you say is right. It would be better if smart people were doing this. It would be better if there was a president who had a view of foreign policy that was more studied than whatever he thinks is going to get him the most plaudits on Fox and Friends. It would be great if they had a White House who could run a real process that brought input in from all the various parts of the government, whether it's the intel agencies or the diplomats or the military. Like, it would be much better off if we had smarter, better people running our government. But diplomacy is the right thing generally, and it's the right thing here. And we defended Barack Obama up and down when he wanted diplomatic relations with Cuba, with Iran, when he said in 2008 that he would meet with foreign leaders without preconditions. All of those things we believe then, and we should believe now. And I'd much rather have Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un than launching missiles at his head, just because he's angry that day about the Mueller investigation. And so I think this is good, and it is. It really is Forrest Gump foreign policy, because he really just stumbled into this by sending some tweets. And if it works, great. It's not because he's some sort of foreign policy genius. Sometimes you just show up, and next thing you know, you're on the national table tennis team. It's pure happenstance.
Even a blind mole.
He did it. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Broken clock. Blah blah blah.
Blind squirrel farm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's good. We have a long way to go before this meeting actually happens. Whether you actually get to some sort of agreement, this does play into, and this is really something that I know Tommy's talked a lot about, but this really intersects in a way that I'm sure Trump has not thought about with the Iran deal. Because if the United States is going to come to an agreement with Iran and then basically just 2 years later cancel it for some sort of fake reason, then what incentive would North Korea have to do a similar deal with the United States? And so we'll see if they can figure out that complexity. But, Bob Corker said the other day that Trump was going to cancel the Iran deal. And so
very worrisome.
Which is worrisome in and of itself, and it's worrisome for what progress we might be able to make with North Korea.
And we should tell people, he cancels the Iran deal. The only thing that does is allows Iran to go back to building nuclear weapons. That's it. Just make sure there's no more international inspectors in Iran, and they can just go back to secretly kicking out the rest of the world and building their nuclear arsenal. And that's what it does. That's all that ripping up the Iran deal does. Now, I think back to North Korea, the other worrisome thing is once you have a meeting between two heads of state, like Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, and you go to that level, if diplomacy fails after that meeting, the next stage is often war. And that's worrisome because, again, Donald Trump's skills as a negotiator, stuff of legend, have not quite been realized since he's become president of the United States and made just about zero deals. So that's something to worry about. Now, let's talk about whether Pompeo should be confirmed. I think it's great that he went to North Korea in advance of a Donald Trump meeting. I do not think he should be Secretary of State. He was one of the leading Benghazi conspiracy theorists in the Senate. He supports torture. He supports regime change in Iran and ending the Iran deal. We just talked about that. He's lied already. He's contradicted the entire intelligence community on their assessments of whether Russia interfered in the election. And then he had to have his own CIA correct him for lying about that. So I don't think he'll be a great Secretary of State, Dan. What do you think?
Well, I was pretty pro Pompeo until I heard that he
what the fuck?
Challenges. So now I flipped, and he seems really bad. I have generally been of the belief that normal presidents deserve to have the cabinet appointments of their choice within a realm of of normalcy, like corruption, lying, things like that should be disqualifying in the Senate. That's the time in which the Senate can use their advice and consent. But simply not liking the policy preferences of said nominee is wrong, because the president should get a normal president. We don't have a normal president right now. Should get their secretary of whatever. It's just the idea that so-and-so is progressive, therefore Obama should not be able to have Tom Perez as Secretary of Labor is not a good enough reason. Right? And the same should be true for some Trump people. Now, that does not mean that Democrats should vote for them. And I think Pompeo has forfeited that sort of I think Trump just generally has forfeited that normal courtesy by violating every norm under the sun. And I think Pompeo has shown himself to be a problematic nominee beyond his policy opinions. Now, with all things with Trump, you worry about what comes next, right? So let's say Pompeo gets defeated, which is possible. It is. If all the Democrats were to vote no, then Pompeo will go down.
That's right. If one Democrat votes for him, he's Secretary of State. If 0 Democrats vote for him, he's not. That's basically where the vote count is. Yeah,
and who do we get after that? This is not a reason to vote for him. It's more of just like a thought experiment.
Yeah, no,
like Trump. It's like, who is the
new immediate promotion for John Bolton?
Yeah, or Newt Gingrich, right? Like something crazy. I mean, what most likely happens is we have some sort of acting deputy. We have some sort of acting Secretary of State through the midterms. Is what probably happens.
Yeah,
I think Democrats should defeat him. You had the opportunity to do so. It is the right. First off, it's the right thing to do. This man should not be Secretary of State.
And I will say too, like I talked about how he's for regime change in Iran, ending the Iran deal. I think in a normal administration, those should not be disqualifying because those are policy differences, right? It's like you were saying, a president gets to nominate people who reflect his policies or her policies. I do think supporting torture, lying about the intelligence community assessment, promoting Benghazi conspiracy theories, those are things that go beyond just policy difference. Supporting torture is not a policy difference. It is supporting something that is against the law, against international law. So I think that sort of did it for me.
Yeah, across the board, the way he has responded to questions about Trump putting his thumb on the scale on the Russia investigation should, in and of itself, mean he should not be Secretary of State. Yeah. And Democrats should defeat him. And I know I've been in politics for a while now, and I know there are consultants. People should do what they think is right.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just do the politics for a second,
mm-hmm.
right? If some moderate Democratic senator knows Mike Pompeo and truly believes he would be a quality Secretary of State, then vote your conscience, I guess. I find that hard to imagine that someone would look at the facts on the table and believe that. But if you're doing the politics, the downside, just pure politics, you're doing the downsides of voting against Trump's Secretary of State are quite small. Because the political strategy of appeasement does not work.
Yeah.
And so if you think if I vote for him, they're not gonna say I'm obstructing Trump's agenda, then you're being incredibly naive about politics, not just in 2018, but in politics of the last 30 years in dealing with Republicans.
Yeah, find me the voter in Missouri or West Virginia or Indiana or any of these places who's looking at a Democratic candidate and is like, I think you're just too partisan and you're too liberal. You have all these crazy liberal ideas and blah, blah, blah. And then the Democratic candidate says, but wait, I voted for Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State and gave Donald Trump as Secretary of State. And then that voter says, oh my God, I'm with you. I'm going to the polls. I'm voting for you. Find me that voter. I would like the consultants who are advising our friends in the Senate to find me those voters, and I will change my mind.
You are either going to be accused of you're either going to be the senator who approved Pompeo or defeated Pompeo, and in an election where your election depends entirely on particularly in a red state, of all of these first-time voters, people who are engaging in politics because they are so upset by the election of Trump and have been, sort of awakened from their slumber. You need those people to vote. And if you look like you're rubber stamping Trump's nominee out of political expediency, people are not going to come out and vote for you. The Trump voters are still going to vote against you. And the Democrats who you need to knock on doors, make calls for you, donate $5 and show up to vote are going to be less likely to do so because it's not going to – what's the difference to them if they feel that it's just a lesser shade of who the Republican alternative? So do the right thing here. But I think, to me, I understand – the thinking, because I've seen it for years and years and years, that would lead people to think that the right political thing to do is vote for Pompeo. I think that thinking is outdated and shows an inability to have learned lessons in the most recent elections.
Absolutely. Okay, when we come back, we will talk to activist and friend of the pod, Addie Barkan.